Thanks for pressing play. This is Christopher Lochhead, Follow Your Different, where we aspire to have real dialogues, not interviews, with amazing people who are making the world a different place. We are sponsored by the good folks at Oracle NetSuite. To learn how to turbocharge the growth of your business, visit netsuite.com/different today. On this episode, we hang out with one of my absolute favorite people. He's a technology thought leader, communications guru. He spent many decades as a journalist and editor in the business technology world. We've got the host of Cloud Wars podcast, or the Cloud Wars live podcast, my buddy, Bob Evans. And in addition to all of that, Bob is a powerful example of a couple of things that I think are really important, maybe even more so today than ever. The first is how to be yourself in business. Bob is an incredibly unique guy on many dimensions, and he doesn't hold back. He's very playful, and he doesn't fit into any mold. And frankly, I think that's a big part of why he's had such a legendary career. As a matter of fact, he was the head editorial chief at Information Week, and he was the senior executive responsible for communications at Oracle, working directly for Larry Ellison. He's also a great example of superstar executives that are leaving the corporate world to go out on their own. And as you may have seen, my buddy Eddie Yoon and I just wrote an article for the Harvard Business Review about this exact topic. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Now, Bob and I have a fun, playful conversation. We talk about everything from movies to why being direct is such a virtue, the downside of quote-unquote judgment-free zones, how humans are integrating technology into their bodies, and a whole lot more. Go to lochhead.com for more information on Bob's impressive background and for the show notes and key takeaways from this episode. Now, hey-ho, let's go.
So, Chris, these two movies, and I want to mention to you. So there's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I suspect that is one you would call a favorite or very familiar with.
I don't know that I'd be in a hurry to watch it, right? Because it's heavy.
Yeah.
And I think we
yes,
live...
it is.
I don't know. My wife doesn't like watching anything that's heavy. And I also think we live in a time where you can turn the news on and be so freaked out that watching shit that further freaks you out. So anyway, I don't watch as much of that kind of stuff as I used to for those two reasons. But that said, I bet you I've probably seen it half a dozen times. And and I want to say, is it possible we had to read it in school? Because I want to say I read. I'm almost positive I read it. Yeah. And I remember reading. It's Nurse Ratched, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I read the book, and it's possible we would have read. Imagine telling kids you had to read that in school today. There's no way they'd read that in school, is there? Or would they?
Well, I think it goes back to some of what you were talking about. We're also worried about spooking the little darlings that you don't ask them to read something that pushes them out of a fairly narrow and absurd comfort zone, which is,
it's a heavy book.
It is, and some people say, well, you shouldn't give people anxiety about going to see a nurse or a doctor. Nurse Ratched has harmed the health. Get lost, But Chris, there's so many great scenes in there, like when Chief goes, juicy fruit. And, he lets it out that he can talk. But there's the one scene, right, where Jack Nicholson goes and he tries to pick up the giant marble or granite water fountain in the middle of the room. And it's got to weigh half a ton. He can't pick it up. And he's there straining and roaring and everybody's watching him. And, he finally stands up and they start getting on like, oh, you couldn't do it. And he says to him, yeah, well, at least I tried. And then another movie, and I think it sort of is in that same a little bit heavy thing, Cool Hand Luke.
Oh, yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah, and again, so many iconic, just unforgettable scenes in there. But there's
and
the
really
one...
great cinematography, if I remember right. Right, the way the sky looks, and
everything. They don't try to make that Quonset hut that those guys lived in, either better or worse than it was, and they're out on the road gang and the mirrored sunglasses.
Who could ever forget the car wash scene? Holy cow. When you're a young guy and you see that car wash scene, Holy shit, that's a car wash scene right there. Probably greatest car wash scene ever, wouldn't you say?
And, greatest scene. And then the George Kennedy line where he says, "Loud," he said, "if you're going to strike me blind, please don't do it now."
Yes, how could I forget? Yeah, my sentiments exactly.
Yes, yes, yeah. Well, I'm sure she didn't know what she was doing there. It was just all a coincidence. But
Yes, exactly.
Chris, there's one scene in there. So Luke and the George Kennedy guy have their big boxing match, and George Kennedy almost kills him, and he keeps getting up. And George Kennedy finally is feeling sorry for him. And, Paul Newman's eyes are swollen shut and his lips are split. And George Kennedy picks him up and he whispers in his ear, he said, "Just stay down, just stay down." And Luke says, "You're going to have to kill me." So later on, they're playing cards and playing poker, and Luke just bluffs the shit out of everybody and wins a huge pot. And George Kennedy picks the cards up, and Luke has nothing. He's got a bunch of scrap in his hand. And he said, "Man," he said, "you didn't have nothing." And that's when Luke says, "Yeah, well, sometimes nothing's a mighty cool hand." And there's the name Cool Hand Luke. And so the two things, one, in the fight, he says, "You're going to have to kill me because I'm not going to stay down." And then in the card game, when he says nothing's a mighty cool hand, but he didn't have anything in cards, what he had was in his heart. And I thought that the combination of those two things, you're going to have to kill me, and it's not the stuff around you, it's who you are and how you play yourself, not just you play the cards. And then the Jack Nicholson thing is saying, "Yeah, well, at least I tried." There is so much. And going back to some of what you said, we are in a time now when so much of our life is, restricted. We let fear shrink our world. We let, fear crush our dreams. We let our concerns, what somebody else might think. And now these external forces of, you can't say this, you can't say that, you can't look at this, you can't think this way. You got to watch this. And, looking at some of those Google tapes and watching, that scene from almost 2 years ago, this collective thinking and the sort of fixed Borg mind like thing there, that it's very weird. But I think even though some of these two movies are really heavy, I think it's good to go back and look at some of those things and realize we get to parts of where we are today by letting it happen. Decline is a choice. And when we let forces beyond ourselves close the walls in on, when we let them do that to us, bad things, that anyway, I think that leads to a much poorer life, much less interesting life, and much less happy life.
Wow, Bob, that was beautiful, man.
Wow.
You had some stuff to share.
Well, when I have the honor of being invited back onto one of the world's top podcast shows, I think, okay, you can't just go on there and, blah, 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 blah.
Well, it's amazing to me, too. You pick, some movies that I absolutely love, right? Classics, of course, but movies that I really love. So that's kind of an interesting point. And then some great scenes.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, part of the guest's job is to make the host look good. I come in here and talk about movies you don't care about. You're going to be dozing, plucking Gertrude's feathers. And
when you first started to talk about movies, I thought to myself, "Oh shit, he's probably going to talk about current movies, and I don't know any current movies. So what am I going to do here? Because if he brings up the new." I don't even know who the people are. I don't even know who any of them are. The newest person I know is maybe Adele. I don't, and actors and shit. I don't know any. There are a couple of the big names, of course, and they're really great actors. I mean, I know who Tom Hanks is, and Meryl Streep and shit. But if you name some 30-year-old actor who's hot right now,
nope, I'm with you.
No idea.
Chris, can I mention one other thing that goes in with this? And you come out of the world that both you and I have spent a big chunk of our professional lives in, like the tech business, but it could be any business. But I can't tell you how many times, was it 6, 7 years ago, when I left the media business and I wanted to jump into the tech industry and work inside the tech industry. I couldn't tell you the number of people, but it's vast numbers of people that would say, "Oh, you went over to the dark side." And I know what that means. And again, I don't get mad or upset by it, but I just went, why do they think that way? And I remember a couple times when I'd have a conversation with somebody, I'd say, why do you look at it that way? He said, "Oh, well, you've gone over to, the dishonest side." I said, "Really? So you as a reporter, you're the honest guy, right? Now I'm the dishonest guy. But who do you want to come to for information? Me. Who has all the information that you want? Well, it's these tech companies and their customers. So why is this the dark side?" I think that I jumped into the, bright, brilliantly lit place,
how about
coming
this?
out of the dark place.
One of the jewels of humanity, the information technology industry. I mean, come on. People need to give their head a shake, right? And there's all this bitching about whatever it is, about some reason to bitch about technology. And of course, there's plenty of reasons to bitch about technology. But, and it's a very big fucking but, the standard of living on planet Earth has never been higher. Period. Full stop. End of discussion.
Yeah.
It's not a discussion, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying technology is solely the reason for that. Of course it's not. Human beings have a ton to do with it as well. But information technology and biotechnology and medical technology and energy technology, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, innovation overall has massively increased the well-being of human beings and the lifespan of human beings and the quality of life of human beings around the world. And there's no fucking denying that. And so to get back to your point, I don't know why technology companies or any companies, frankly, would be considered guilty and not innocent. Okay, now look, you want to say if the profit motive is an evil thing? Well, we can have a discussion about that if you want, but don't tell me I'm a bad person because I'm an entrepreneurial capitalist. Because what entrepreneurial capitalists do is they make money by creating value as defined by solving a problem that somebody's willing to pay them to solve. And if you do that, the assumption is you're doing a fucking good thing for fucking somebody. So fucking A. Now, I'm not saying there aren't criminals and bad people in business. Of course there are. But for the most part, just like the rest of the world, those are outliers.
Yeah. 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 No, you think about what has happened in the last 40, 50 years in all those fields you mentioned. And then you go off into things like this video. I remember a friend of mine from the medical school at the University of Pittsburgh sent this to me, and it was a little short video, but there was a medical experiment, Chris, involving a monkey, and the monkey was, I forget what the illness was, but it was it didn't have use of one of its arms. And they were able to, they had a little metal cap on it, and through stimulating the monkey's brain through electrical currents, the monkey was able to reach out and start to manipulate its arm, which had never been able to move before. So you think about people, they haven't been able to see, they haven't been able to hear, they never saw their parents, they didn't see, the colors in the world or be able to use it. And these advances in technology, they're not just cool in of themselves, right? Like what you're saying, they touch people in ways that are unimaginable.
Well, yeah, I mean, this field of neuroplasticity and everything around it, I mean, it's incredible, right? We can literally wake up parts of our brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we had Dr. Daryl Treffert on, and, he's considered the world leader in autism and savantism and genius. And he was the consultant on Rain Man because they wanted to get it right. That's kind of the level that he plays at. And he says what they're trying to do, particularly in somebody who's severe on the spectrum of autism, is they're trying to find he calls them islands of intactness. And then grow it and nurture it and love it and support it. And there's a breakthrough that happens with people who have autism when you can find that place and then from there allow them to come out. And part of what's going on is refiring parts of their brains.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we can all do it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's extraordinary. What you're describing there. So I feel sorry for, I feel angry at, but I also sort of feel sorry for some people who get trapped into these, whatever they are, mindsets about, well, journalism's all wonderful and the business people is the dark side and this and that. And again, Chris, I just think it's one of those things that there needs to be some severe shaking of some people, as you said, shake their brain up a little, because what it does, and this is, one of the things I wanted to talk with you about today, was this construction of walls or barriers or limitations. And I just think that more and more we do that, right? Because there are some legitimate reasons for that, right? Is, somebody gets to be older, well, maybe you shouldn't run marathon. Maybe you got to stop doing certain physical activities or moderate them a little bit. There's a point at which you got to get glasses, all this stuff. I get that.
Maybe day drinking 6 times a week is not what you should be doing.
Yeah. Which day do you skip?
I take the Lord's Day off.
Wow. No surprise there. So I think that's one of the things that, I always tried to talk about with my kids, which was, the world's a big place, and you find the parts of it that you really enjoy and go after them, but don't ever let anybody talk that down or talk you out of it, or all those things about, well, you shouldn't do this, you can't do that, nobody will believe you, nobody will trust you. God, that's limiting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The other one, and I don't know why I'm connecting this one in my head, but I am, is I guess it's going to sound trite as shit, but generally try to treat people well, even when you're supposedly, or as they say now, supposedly. You know that? Yes. You notice that? People say supposedly. So I think within 15 years, it'll just be supposedly. We won't even remember what it once was. Right. But anyway, with people who are supposedly your adversaries, because there's an interesting thing. I was talking to a few people about this in Silicon Valley, where, the ecosystem is so tight that your competitor today is the venture capitalist who invests in your business 10 years from now, right? And I have this relationship with Bruce Cleveland, and he was the head of products and marketing at Siebel when I was at Vantiv. And the truth is, he literally destroyed my self-worth and my net worth at the same time, and we've become friends, and it's great. And recently I was in this meeting, and I got introduced to this gal who today is in a investor relations role. And she introduced herself to me. I said hello, and da-da-da. Anyway, when there was a break in the meeting, it was an all-day meeting I was at, she came up to me and she introduced herself with her full name. Well, long story way longer, this gal was an analyst who covered Mercury back in the day, as we say.
Yeah.
And she, let's say, had some adversarial moments with our CFO. And so she sort of came to out herself, say, hey, look, it's me. And you could sort of see the armor come up. She fully expected I was going to smash her. And I said, the first thing I said to her was I horrible to you back then? Did I do anything that I need to be apologizing for right now? To which, by the way, she said no. And then she sort of said, are you mad at me? And I said, no, you were doing your job.
Yeah.
And, we had a grumpy CFO who could get adversarial. So that's not necessarily a shock. And were you doing things that I liked? No, not always. Did it piss me off? Yes, sometimes. But you're an analyst. You're supposed to dig. You're supposed to, take positions on things. And, to your point, management's not always going to like them. Anyway, long story, way longer. It turns out I guess I didn't treat her badly at all. And she remembers that. And I don't harbor anything towards her. She was doing her job. And so, and also, by the way, that was fucking 100 years ago.
Right. Yeah. How much storage space do you have in your heart for anger and vindictiveness and pettiness
Well,
and all
I
that.
have a bunch.
Sure, sure.
Maybe more than I should, or more than most, but because anger is a thing let me say, relate to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to your point, it's like, really, she didn't like it when somebody does something that you remember for a long time because it was truly, in your opinion, out of integrity, or very assholey behavior, or whatever it was. That it's, if you can remember why you're mad, then I think, at least for me, I'm legit in my anger towards you. um, if you don't
Yeah.
really remember, it's like, oh, yeah, I remember you pissed me off, but I don't remember her ever crossing a line.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's a very
Yeah.
different thing.
There was a there was a guy today I was trying to deal with for over about 5 weeks. We had agreed to do something about 5 weeks ago. I never heard from him. I never heard from him. I sent a note to somebody else in his company and said, "Hey, I'm sorry, I just can't do this because I've been getting the silent treatment from so and so for 5 weeks." And so this other person calls my original contact, who gets in touch with me, like, "Oh," and he had this stuff. And I said, "Look, it's okay. I'm not mad, but I have no interest in doing business with you because clearly you have no interest in doing business with me. I'm not upset." And his comment was, "It's unfortunate that you have that impression." And Chris, I wanted to say, okay, we can frame it that way, but I don't have an impression. I have facts, right? We were supposed to do something. 5 weeks went by. You ignored messages from me. Okay, that's fine. You don't want to do it, but don't, fluff this thing up.
Yeah.
I just have this sort of screwed up view of the world that something that was supposed to take a couple of days, was 5 weeks, and you never responded. So it's funny. We play these games, and I think it's almost like when somebody starts to tell lies, you have to think, now what did I say to who, and who said what to whom, and tracking those lies. It's got to be exhausting. So I'm with
Yeah.
you, brother. Let's, say what you need to
Say what you
say.
need to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, so my friend and mentor Bix Bixen has now taught me a language, or a way to describe this to people that I think makes it easier for them to be that way, were they not more prone to it, like you and
Uh-huh.
I are, shall I
Uh-huh.
say. And so the way Bix describes it is, he says there's two conversations that happen. There's the foreground conversation. That's the one that happens in the meeting and happens when everyone's around, or happens over the dinner table with the whole family, or on the double date with you, Wendy, and whoever the fuck you're out with. There's that conversation. And then there's the background conversation, which is you and Wendy in the car on the way home, or over a beer after the big meeting, or over text at the during the meeting, whatever it
Yeah.
is, right? So there's a foreground conversation and there's a background conversation, and of course, when asked, which is the authentic conversation, everybody says the same thing, and so Bix then asks the question: can we agree to have the background conversation in the foreground?
Yeah.
Let's just get to it. And I think that's a gentle way of doing it, isn't it? Or at least gentler than what I would say.
Yeah. Slap. Now let's talk. Yeah. Chris, I love that because, and you can imagine some of the people in the room, their head snap. I was like, wait a minute, what? I'm being fully honest with you. It's like, okay, no, you're not.
Yeah.
You're right. That otherwise it gets to be a waste of time here. So um, there's a nonprofit board that I'm on. I joined about 6 months ago, and the
So you
terrific.
just wanted to torture yourself? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, penance.
And look, I love nonprofits, but nonprofit. Let me say it for this. I'll speak for myself. I'm not the person you want on the board of your nonprofit.
Well, I think I'm taking on that persona there, and one of the things I said was, there's as we've started to talk about more substantive issues, there's a couple people who say like, well, I don't want this to be taken the wrong way, or I really hesitate to bring this up, and I don't want to offend anybody. And it's like, oh my God, we just say what you think there. Otherwise, we're taking this board responsibility for a very viable nonprofit, and something that deserves our full effort and energy, and we're giving it 5% of what we have. And it's like,
And even worse than that, and
don't do
afterwards
this.
we leave the meeting and everybody talks about what an asshole everybody else is. Right?
Yeah, that's why I never leave the meetings.
Exactly.
I can't be talked about. So, hey, first I want to ask in a second if you would be willing to talk a little bit more about your mentor, because two things. One, somebody that you would feel sort of is capable of being your mentor. That's pretty interesting. And then somebody who is actually able to fill that role. So I do want to come back to that. But let me, Chris, just swing around on something here a little bit. And, you're an entrepreneur, think in ways that, lots of other people don't think. I think some of the stuff we were talking about before, and this need for more directness, more honesty, and also this sense of, this is how I feel, and I'm not going to just sort of pussyfoot all around it. Okay. So did you ever do an outward bound?
No, but I've done things like that.
Things like, man,
Yeah.
I tell you, in a way it's kind of sunshine. It's like, boys weekend and blah, blah, blah. That stuff, you push people out.
Go put your ass on a
their
mountain
comfort.
and see what happens.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
so you're looking down, and that, guy who's sort of been a dick, for the last day and a half, he's holding that rope that's, got my fat ass, it's between me and eternity. So you better figure out a way to somehow figure a way to trust or communicate or something like that. I think there's a huge opportunity now, especially with these kids could get to be 15, 16, 18 years old, and they've worn helmets to walk over to their friend's house. They have had to
come
call
on. You're
and
not for
check
the
in.
safety of young people?
Right. I want
Robert
to kill
Evans.
all children. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, clearly.
You know my
Clearly.
theory about where this helicoptering started, right? I think I can trace it. There's one product that fucked us all. And my memory is when this stuff really got going was the invention of the little plastic doohickey carbidingulator that you stick into the light socket.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you and I were kids, that shit didn't exist. And so what do?
Stuck your finger in it.
You stuck your fucking finger in it. You just did. And it fucking hurt. And maybe you tried, if you're like me, you tried it a second time to see if you could do it faster so that maybe it would just be cool and not hurt. And it still hurt. And you pretty much decided you were done with that, right? So now we invent the carbidingulator.
Yeah.
And kids don't do that anymore. Right? And then before you know it, we've nerfed the entire fucking world.
Yes.
See?
Yeah.
We didn't have that.
No, we didn't.
My grandfather used to smoke his pipe in the car while I sat on the front seat with no seatbelt on in a 1970s Plymouth Duster. Yeah, and sometimes he would put me on his lap and let me take the wheel.
Yeah.
Come on, that shit happened. Can you imagine smoking a pipe, no seatbelt, going down the highway at 60 miles an hour, 65 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour, whatever the fuck it was, right? With a
V8, gas guzzling V8.
Yeah, I don't know, how old would I have been? 4 maybe? I don't know. Small enough to sit on his lap. Yeah.
Man, they'd be fighting now when he pulled the car over, there'd be children's services trying to take him, and the smoking police over here, and
can you imagine?
The seatbelt police. Yeah.
He'd be on death row.
And you would have gone right into, who knows what.
Special services or something.
Yes. Lucky you. So, Chris, how about this, Bix, you mentioned a mentor.
Yeah.
That would not be an easy spot to fill for somebody like you, I would think. And I say that in all the right ways.
So is there a question there, Bob, or you just want me to tell you about Bix?
Yeah. So how did this happen, and what is the value? What are the lessons and the insights and the guidance that he is able to provide you? How has he opened up your eyes to the point where you feel, I'm going to not just call this guy my mentor, he's earned the right to be my mentor? That can't have been an easy achievement.
I mean, you'd have to ask him. But I don't know. I mean, I was open to it at the time. So the net of it is, I met Bix when I was 18, and I took this personal development training class. and he led it, and it was incredibly profound for me because not only were the things that he was teaching profound, um, but the way he is. I had been told my entire fucking life that I'm too much, and I still get told that.
Yeah.
And this was the first time that I had seen somebody who was like over the top too much, like just so gigantic, right?
Yeah.
And absolutely fucking owned it and was funny and swore and was smart and was like, and I thought, oh, I didn't know that was an option, that
Yeah.
like you could just be yourself, like you could be
Yeah.
that outrageously great, right?
Yeah.
And so I related to not just the things that he was teaching us, but which I can get into, but I also deeply related to. I think here's the aha. This was true for me, and I've talked to a lot of people about it. I think it's true for most people, which is when you get to see someone that you see yourself in,
Mm-hmm.
but down the line, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
that becomes a very powerful thing. And in the absence of that, it's very challenging for people to cover mass ground in their lives. They have to. We all have to be inspired by somebody, and the more that somebody in some way reminds us about something of ourselves, the more we think maybe we have a shot at achieving the kinds of things that person has achieved in our own right. I think that's a pretty much a universal truth, best I can tell.
Yeah. Krista, if I could just take a slightly different take on the last thing you said, that maybe, then we can achieve some of the types of things that person has achieved. True. But I'd also say that even another take on that is I can then achieve the sorts of things that I am destined or that I want to achieve without ever knowing that I could achieve it. Right. So
For
it's
sure.
a model is set up, but then it's up to the individual to go ahead and, fill that space and achieve it. But it was great when you first said you saw this guy and you realized it's okay. I can
Yeah.
be this way. And
Yeah.
right. It doesn't mean that, I'm perfect or better than others, but I can be the best me that's available. And that had to be pretty
Well, and the
wonderful
big
at
thing for
that
me,
age.
frankly, is I don't have to fucking fit in because Bix did not fucking fit in. It wasn't so much I related to certain of his behaviors and manners and stuff, but like I didn't try to become Bix. You know what I mean? The big teaching for me with him was, wow, you could be that fully expressed and be
Yes.
that outrageous and that, I use this word very much on purpose, that fucking different,
Yeah.
and that it would work, right? Because for me, when I turned the amps on 11, it like it didn't work. Sometimes it worked, but sometimes it really didn't work.
Yeah. 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 And, there's, I think back to that first time I met you. You walked into the conference room, and within 2 or 3 minutes, I had heard a stunning array of swear words, combinations of things, body parts, bodily functions, this and that. And as we had a great conversation, I loved you from the second I met you. And when we were done, there was somebody, PR person, somebody walking out and said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I hope you weren't offended." And I said, "Offended?" I said, "Geez, here's somebody who's actually able to he's willing to say what he thinks." I said, "It was great. It was great." But too much of that stuff. And I think, not trying to be a Johnny One Note here, but that type of thing starts to set up the barriers. Don't step over this line. Don't say this. Don't think that way. Tone this down. Round off your corners. Why can't you be more like everybody else? And why do you always have to be the one who does this? On and on and on and on. And
Yeah,
that's a terrible, terrible thing. That's Larry Ellison. Chris gave this. I think he's given two commencement talks. One about 25 years ago at Carnegie Mellon, and another one a couple of years ago at USC. And his big message to the USC graduates was, he said, "I know this from personal experience." He said, "Don't try to be the person that other people want you to be. Figure out who you want to be. Block everything else out and go be that person." And it's when you can get to that thing of, understanding fear and confront it and face up to it. And whether it's fear or unhappiness, whatever the thing is. But I think more and more these days, it's fear that we have. I won't fit in. I'll be misunderstood. They won't like me. You know, how, whatever it's couched in, it's just limiting, and it's limiting. And you're probably one of the great examples of somebody, let me be who I am, fill the space that I'm in, and I'm going to be so happy. Not just me, I'm going to make others around me happy, successful, excited, engaged, and so on like that. And that won't happen when we allow these external traps and, you know, electric dog fences to be put up around us.
Amen. Hallelujah. And, you know, the other part of it that comes with it is a commitment on one hand to be fully expressed and be yourself, and at the same time be responsible, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, if you being fully, like, I read this story recently. There was some guy working out at some gym naked. And the gym slogan was something about some mamby-pamby thing about, like, everybody's cool here, do whatever you want, like no judgment, like we're the gym where, like, don't come in here and be self-conscious, you're okay here kind of a place. I don't know how I can't remember now how they said it, but that was their niche down strategy, okay? And so when the cops show up, the guy's in naked in downward facing dog, if I remember correctly. Terrible position to be in naked. And the cops show up and he says, "Oh, I thought this was a judgment-free zone." A judgment-free zone. And so what's my point?
God,
my point is
us.
He was being himself. He was following his different. He fucking sure was. But hey, man, you're naked by yourself doing yoga in the gym. Probably not going to score points with anybody. So, like, there's some line we're trying to find here is my point.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's, well, you know, it's a silly thing in some ways. So I'm not trying to make this a profound thing, but you would, one of the things, we've laughed about this, is what do you call them? Your yabba dabba ding dong suits?
Yeah, the super ding-dongs.
You know, where the lining of your suits was even more wonderful and outrageous than the outside. And I just thought, so I sometimes would sort of point that out in public spaces and places because, first, I, of course, wanted to needle you wherever I possibly could. But
Make
also,
fun of my suits.
No, I loved the suits, but it was also one of those things of saying, look, he's not, you know, he's not getting fired because of this. People aren't going to stop listening to him because he wears a loud suit.
He did get fired a bunch, though.
Well, yeah, we'll gloss over some of the facts, but you know,
don't let the facts get in the way of a good story.
Heck no. But it's, you know, some of those little things. And I remember at one of your events, you were talking about something, you cracked a couple jokes that either people didn't get or they weren't like it, and it was sort of, there wasn't a lot of laughter as there usually is after your things, and you just looked at everybody and said, "Hey, I'm here for the whole week. So I'm going to keep plowing on. So find a way to enjoy it, fans." And that was just the right thing, because I think people were expecting to be bored, because so often at events like that they are. And you were coming, you were zigging, and they expected zag. So it is one of those things that I think if you talk about, you know, a high purpose, highly, what term you using, expressed life, is, yes, that responsibility has to fit in. But the first responsibility, I think, is to yourself. Who am I? What do I want to be? Where do I want to go? And then when I understand that, then I can set up the appropriate responsibility. So I'm not doing the, naked dog down in the gym when the police arrive.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, the interesting point about that, my friend, the legendary designer, John Bielenberg, makes a point when he's trying to teach people to think in super creative ways. He calls it thinking wrong. Mm-hmm. So whatever the topic is, you say, okay, well, what would most smart people do around topic A? You know, the example he uses is when he does workshops sometimes is make a bicycle. Mm-hmm. So if somebody tasked you and I with making a bicycle, we would try to make the best bicycle we could figure out how to make. That's the human inclination, right? And so his instruction is make any bicycle you want, do absolutely anything you want, but there's one condition. It can't be rideable. And so that's thinking wrong. And the reason for it is the minute you take the rideable constraint away, so to speak, and you make it silly, people get very silly. And he said you can always take something that's crazy and dial it down, but it's hard to take something that's incremental and dial it up. Anyway,
Yes.
so that provides me with a lot of comfort because I have to get dialed down fairly regularly.
Yeah, but I hope not too much. Chris, there's a that design wrong. There's an architect. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. He's a relatively young guy. I believe he's Danish. I think his first name is Bjark, but he's built some stunning buildings in Manhattan and some other things around the world. They wanted to build in Stockholm. I think they had to build a new garbage recycling plant somewhere in or near the city. They asked him to do it. He said, okay, we're going to do this. And the design was it's a public park with a ski slope, and inside is the recycling plant. And I heard him talk once. I went up, just chatting with him a little bit afterward. And he said, the real key is, he said, some of these problems, he said, we look to make them easy. And he said, that's when you get sloppy, boring, average, mundane solutions. He said, I always try to go in with my team and we try to make it as hard as humanly possible. He said, because that is when you get your creativity pushed out to places we don't normally go. And it is totally counterintuitive to how many of us go about thinking things. And we try to...
Isn't that the old, let me get this right, necessity is the mother of invention? Is that how the saying goes?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the good's perfect's the enemy of the good, or some of these bromides, gotta look at these.
My wife just bought this thing. You want to hear a crazy story? So she goes to these junk fests, where they sell junk, but like high-end ding-dong junk, because she's into that stuff. What are the antiques? That's it. Antiques. So fucking terrible.
That's a French word.
Yes. C'est tellement antique. Anyway, so she goes to this thing a couple weekends ago, and this is what she buys. A Turkish device that is made out of wood and is fucking heavy as shit, and it's about 6 feet long, and it looks sort of like a wooden sled. And into the bottom of it, the bottom third of it, which is sort of, it's a bit of a wedge shape, so it comes out at the top slightly. But anyway, are these carvings with fucking stones etched into it, like many, many stones, and they're sharp as shit. So what is this thing? It's an early, they don't know exactly what year, but it's an early farming tool. They would drag this thing behind a horse, and this was how they would start the harvest of wheat. And it's one of the first pieces of technology known to man for wheat harvesting. And because it's built like a sled type thing, there's literally somebody on top of it grabbing, right? And so anyway, and there's pictures of this shit online. There's paintings of people doing this stuff. And so, you look at it and you just go, well, when you get to a place that says hand picking wheat sucks, there has got to be a better way, right? And so you do what you can, and they literally turn these rocks into like blades. They sharpen the rocks, and then they fashion the holes in the wood for each of the rocks. It's trippy.
Yeah, you got a lot of people to feed, and maybe not a loving, benevolent boss, ruler, king, over there who's threatened some pretty severe punishment if you don't get the wheat in on time. That inspires some pretty cool innovation. And
now I've been thinking about this recently. So everybody's worried about the AI is going to take over, and the machines are going to take over, and they're going to kill us, and or we're going to merge with the machines, and there's going to be some weird space alien human mutation that's merged with machines and all this stuff. Here's the aha. The aha is when human beings invent the first tool, that happened,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yep.
And so, and now, of course, it's radical because we all have iPhones and smartphones, and that thing might as well be attached to us. Like, and so, like, we are already integrated with the machines. And just like watch people walk across a street with moving cars on their iPhone to understand we are already integrated with the machines, right?
Yeah.
But the truth is, the first tool, right? The first axe, the first time a human uses a rock to try to do whatever it is, right? That started the cycle.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. It's been around a while, man. Chris, uh, this thing, I think my first year in college, philosophy class, and like, tens of millions of other people heard about the philosopher's hammer. So you got this hammer and you're pounding away on something and the head flies off. So you replace the head. Well, is it the same hammer? And then the handle breaks and you replace the handle. Is the same hammer. So getting all that stuff. But I have a couple of my siblings, they got two artificial knees, at least an artificial hip. We're bonding with the technology, in highly intimate ways. And what can happen now with things that come in and control your hearts. And this, you were talking about the biomedical technologies coming up. In this one medical school I worked with recently, it's something like approaching 35% of the faculty at this medical school are from the bioengineering school. They're not physicians, because there's such an interest in the medical students of how do we start to wire non-human, non-organic stuff into the human body to, create a better life, better health.
Well, and then I saw this on the news, I don't know, in the last 6 to 9 months or so. There's some technology now that companies are offering to their employees where they put a fucking chip in their hand, and it's your access card, it's your PayPal account or your Apple Pay, so that you can go to the company cafeteria and just like wave your hand in front of a carbidingulator sensor, and you just buy your lunch, and you can and so like you go, what? My company is going to put some kind of a chip in my body, and like, you got to be out of your mind.
Yeah.
But this is what we're doing, right?
I thought when you first mentioned that, when you said they put a chip in your hand, I thought it's like said, hey, they put this your employee badge in your hand, but you mean they put it in your hand?
Yeah,
So,
they embed
yes.
it in your person.
Holy, yeah.
No,
Sign
it's
me up
in
for
your
that.
ass. They just put it in you. Like, they cut you open and they put this fucking thing in you. I don't know how they do it. I'm making that up. But it's in your body. I don't know how it gets there. Maybe they shove it up your nose. I don't know.
Wow. Yeah. Good. Could I prefer to have it in the earlobe. Is that okay? Is that
Yeah.
culturally attuned?
And then look, the 3D printing of limbs is a thing.
Yeah.
Like, I forget who said this recently, but I like it's like, hey, just so you know, and if you're not paying attention, the future's here already.
Who was it? I think that was the guy William Gibson, and he wrote
Is that who said that?
Neuromancer, and I think he said the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay. Yeah, I
I
like that
think
one. The other one I really like in this regard is Yogi Berra. It's really hard to make predictions, especially about the future.
Hey, that well,
Right?
who's going to argue with that? Who's going
Nobody.
to argue with
You
that?
can't not going to argue with Yogi.
No way, especially with a name like that. How could you? Do
Oh,
you know,
greatest
Chris, that
name
that
ever.
guy also he spent 3 years in the military, I think, in Korea, and he what did he have 9, 10 World Series rings, but he took these 3 years off to go do that. Remarkable people, and
Yeah.
Chris, it's
Yeah.
a great pleasure. Thank you very much for letting me come back and bask in your brilliance and offer up a couple theories here and there. I learn a lot and I get inspired. And thank you really sharing that story about the self-expression. And it's okay. It's okay to be too much.
Yeah. Well, maybe too much is what we need sometimes.
Because it's never enough.
Yeah, and one of my favorite quotes, you know what I love? I love that when I get quotes wrong, people email me about it. Like I get all these emails in 2 weeks. But I think it was Mae West who said, "Too much of a good thing can be wonderful."
Yeah.
All
Well,
right,
I
Senator
remember,
Evans.
Chris, it's a great pleasure. Thanks a lot. Hang in there. Say hi to Carrie, and
You too, brother. Say hi to Wendy. And
we'll
hey, let's
do.
come back sooner. We shouldn't. It shouldn't be every year and a half. It should be way more often than that. I will if you will.
Who could ask for more? And if it's okay, we'll get you slotted in on the Cloud Wars Live.
Oh,
Come
I would
share your
love to do that.
brilliance.
I would love to do that. You're one of my favorite people to follow. Your stuff is really really good.
Uh,
And let me just say one other thing. Do you have a sec before I let you go?
sure. Yeah, yeah.
So, we had this guy on named Isaac Morehouse, and he's the founder of this outfit called Praxis. And they are essentially a college alternative. They're a year-long program, mostly for young people, and they call themselves a new category called a career launch service. And it's sort of half book work, so to speak, and half apprentice work. So you come out with a skill, and you've apprenticed somewhere, and they're primarily targeted for young people who want to work in non-engineering jobs in
Yeah,
startups.
yeah.
So that's sort of where they're pointed. Anyway, long story longer, he has this fascinating point of view, which is be your own credential.
Yeah.
And you're a guy who used to write for very big damn deal brands, and that mattered then, right? You had a position in the industry because at the time you were the chief ding dong at Information Week, right? And that meant something. Here's the interesting thing, and I'm not saying there aren't media brands that are valuable. I'm not that stupid, but we don't need them. He says, be your own credential. And your shit stands out because it's great shit, not because you're the chief editorial ding dong at Information Week or I don't know where, right? In the old days, right? And so it's like, isn't it Dan Rather who's doing this now, or he just is sort of doing his commentary on his own? I think it's Dan Rather. And he's, you can't even remember anymore which network he was associated with. He's just Dan Rather, right? And so you're sort of like that. You're your own credential. The quality of your thinking comes across. You are doing a great niche down strategy. You're trying to own a very particular conversation around who's winning in the cloud. So very tight niche, and you're positioning yourself to dominate the niche. And so you're just executing that strategy really well. And the coolest thing about all of that is we live at a time where we get to do that. You're a media company.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And anybody who can, think can go do that. Assuming they want to go do that. I don't know that everybody has to do that, but you've reinvented yourself for, I don't know how many times you'd consider it, but multiple times, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, thanks. That's very gracious. I'll tell you something, just related to that, because the whole entrepreneurial side. So, a couple of years ago when I knew I was going to be leaving Oracle and start my own thing, I was putting together some plans about, okay, well, what will this new business do? And I put a ton of thought into it. After I left Oracle, spent several weeks getting this refined and all that. And it's fun going back and looking at the stuff I created because it was an extremely worthwhile exercise to go through all this. But in fact, all these plans I had, and I'd have this service and this service and this, I've done none of that. It had zero bearing on what I did. But the discipline of thinking about it and getting engaged and firing that stuff up and saying, okay, here's the tool set and here's how I want to look at stuff and here's what I'm going to go do and figure out. It, I think, prepared me to go in and say, I don't know exactly what this is going to be like, but whatever comes up, I'm going to be ready for that. So it was funny. And if we allow those things like, well, this was my plan and I made the plan, so I got to stick to the plan, that would have been crushing for me. So I think part of it was having to confidence and the courage to go and say, no, I made the plan, but the plan will be a guide until the first shot's fired. And then all the plans get thrown out the window and you got to deal with reality. And then it's like, anybody coming out, and you got to use your brains, your experience and other stuff and see an opportunity and keep getting out of this box of, well, so-and-so's doing this over here. Maybe I should do that. I have been so lucky in, some of the people I've gotten to work with. It's still a fun business, but more and more, man, these companies that get so caught up in the stuff they make instead of the value that they could offer. I think that's an enduring human problem, and thank goodness it's going to be around for at least a few more years.
Well, as they say in Australia, good on you.
Very good.
Thank you, Senator Evans.
Christopher, always a pleasure. Thanks a million.
We'll talk soon, brother.
See you, my friend. Bye-bye.
Wasn't that a great one? Thanks again, Bob, for coming on. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Now, is it grow time for your business? Then it's time to check out netsuite.com/different. NetSuite wants to help you master your growth. NetSuite's order management capabilities are world-class. They help you streamline your order processing, remove manual bottlenecks, and prevent errors in establishing a smooth flow from a sales quote all the way to fulfilling an order, issuing an invoice, and yes, getting paid. And who doesn't like to get paid? NetSuite's order and billing management capabilities integrate your sales, finance, and fulfillment teams to improve your quote accuracy, eliminate billing errors, strengthen your revenue recognition, drive fulfillment and efficiency, and make sure that your cash is always flowing in the right direction. Visit my friends at netsuite.com/different today, and there you'll be able to set up a free 1-hour growth review with an expert in your industry to talk about this and so much more. netsuite.com/different. And if you want to communicate with us, send an email to blackhole@lochhead.com. You can follow me on Twitter @lochhead. And just so you know, when you subscribe to this podcast on any of the major podcast platforms, we don't know you're there. We don't know you're a subscriber. We get no data from those folks. And so the only way we can have a direct relationship, assuming you want to have one, is if you go to lochhead.com and you subscribe to our newsletter, and we will keep you up to date with all the good stuff we have going on here. All right. We would like to thank the amazing Cloud Wars Live podcast. This is Bob Evans' podcast. I love it. I've been a guest on the podcast. I'm hoping to go back. It's awesome. If you're in the tech industry, if you're in business technology, wherever you get great podcasts, check out Cloud Wars Live. Niche Down, the #1 bestseller written by Heather Clancy and myself. Check it out on Amazon.com. The amazing people at onelifefullylived.org. This is the nonprofit that helps you dream, plan, and live your best life. Check us out. We're making a lot of difference in the world. The #1, lifefullylived.org. Now, legendary entrepreneurs are reading growwire.com. This is the new place on the internet for stories of innovation, stories of growth, and great stories about how small entrepreneurs are kicking intergalactic butt. Check out growwire.com today. Now, is it time for some help? You feeling a little whelmed in an overly state? Why not check out Bottleneck Virtual Assistants and look into the power of a virtual assistant. Check out Bottleneck, all one word, .online today. Now, are you in the B2B space? Did you realize that the first thing that happens in business today is somebody Googles your company? And normally the first thing they see is your website. And so your website is the first impression to the world. If you're in the B2B enterprise technology space and you're in the greater Silicon Valley area, you got to get to know my friends at Atranet. Check out ATRE.net to turn your website into your best spokesperson. And a charity, nonprofit that I love, the Front Row Foundation. These folks support people, often young people, who are facing a life-critical disease to put together an extraordinary experience for them and make some memories and some moments that really matter. Check out frontrowfoundation.org. All right, I need to remind you that this oddcast is the sole property of the Lochhead Oddcast Network, and we would love it if you shared the shit out of it. Make no mistake, if you care about what we do, if you get any value at all from any of these conversations, we would love it. Just a little bit extra if you shared on social media this podcast. We must remind you that all rights do remain disturbed. This oddcast is clearly produced in a studio that does contain nuts. Please teach technology leadership. In the event of a water landing, this podcast can be used as a flotation device. Remember, only fart in an elevator with 3 or more people in it. Don't be lame. Get out of the passing lane. Listen to the amazing music of Blue Rodeo. And I want to say, hey, thank you, Candy Dandy. I love you, Mom and Dad. And Colin, this oddcast really ties the room together, doesn't it? Today, our deepest apologies go out to Doug Parker, CEO of American Airlines. Sorry, Dougie. We just ran out of time for you. That's it, my friends. Thank you so much. Till the next time we're together, follow your different.